Okay, so now we made it to the next section where we're going to be talking about for loops. We're going to introduce this concept to you, but we're going to be using a lot of the concepts that we've introduced to you over the last few chapters. It's important to get a good understanding how iteration works, how for loops work, while loops work. So we're going to dig deep into understanding the makeup and breaking down the syntax so you can understand what it does as opposed to trying to memorize the syntax. So this is one of those sections where, again, you need to understand how it works. Don't memorize the syntax, which you need to know what the syntax is, but don't memorize it for a certain situation. Understand what it does. So if you're new to this to this channel and you're not a part of the cohort, you can follow along with the textbook. The link is in the description. It's free for anyone to use. So without further ado, let's get into it. Okay, for loops. The for loop is the first JavaScript tool for iterations that we will explore. A for loop is typically used for definite iteration. Definite iteration is the process of repeating a specific task with a specific data set. Remember this word. First of all, for loops, but definite iterations. Understand what that means. When a for loop begins, it can usually be determined exactly how many times it would execute. Once for each item in the data set. Let me read that again. Once for each item in the data set. Okay, we're going to explain that to you. We have already seen the basic syntax for a for loop. This is the basic syntax right here. But again, we're going to break this down to you so you can understand what each part of this syntax is doing. This program prints the integers 0 through 50, one number per line. In the language of definite iteration, we say that the loop has a data set of 0 through 50, and its action is to print a value to the console. Let's break down this syntax piece by piece so we can begin to understand how for loops are structured. A for loop always contains the following components. These are the components right here. It has an initial expression. See, we have a keyword expression, a loop condition, and an update expression. And then whatever is inside this body, it's going to execute. Now, I want to break this part down to you really quick because I need you to see what it does. So I'm going to come over here. I'm going to go to the console, clear this out. I'm going to copy this again and we kind of copied it in the last video. But I want to break something down to you so you can see this. Let me break this down line by line for you so you can see the three parts. We say initial expression. So down here we got the initial expression, which is this right here. And I'm going to put an enter right there. I'm going to break each one down for you so you can see how different they are, but yet they make up one for loop structure. So if this is the initial expression, look at it. All it is a variable. This I, like I said, we want variables to be distinctive. But in this case, we're using the letter I because that's just the common use. We all do it. But it's a variable. I can call it index. I can call it count. Just like any other variable, you can call it whatever you want to call it, but you make it descriptive. I said distinct earlier, but I mean descriptive. And so here we're initializing it at 0, meaning the index 0. This is why we call it I. And so we're getting the index, starting at index 0, and then we're going to do what? The second part of the loop is structure is the condition. Remember, this has to equate to true. It has to equate to true. And I'm going to show you how that works. And then this last part of the structure is the update expression. If this is true, then it's going to go ahead and update it and update this index right here to the next iteration, which is the next index in the actual whatever it is that you are trying to iterate over. It could be an array. It can be, like I say, a cluster of numbers. Whatever it is that you're trying to iterate over is whatever that is stored in that particular variable that you're trying to iterate over. And we'll show you what that is when we get to the condition, because right now we're just hard coding a condition here, which is the number 51, but we can actually put an object here like a variable with the dot length that we talked about earlier in the array section. So I wanted to show that to you because it's important to see the breakdown of this structure to let you know that it's not just one long piece. Now, notice that in the first line within parentheses, the components initial expression, loop condition, and update expression are separated by semicolons. Let's look at these components in detail. Okay, I kind of showed you visually, and we're going to talk about it some more. I'm reinforcing here. The statement let I assigned to 0 is executed exactly once at the beginning of the loop execution. The variable I is the loop variable. Keyword, variable. This is a variable. The Boolean expression I is less than 51. We're taking this same variable and now we're placing it inside of a condition. And if this condition is true, it's going to keep looping over. So whatever, we starting off at 0. So is 0 less than 51? That's true. So now it's going to update. And what it says here is that this condition is evaluated before each loop iteration or repetition. If the condition is true, then the loop executes again. If the condition is false, then the loop ceases execution and the program moves on to the code below the loop. The statement I++, we've went over this earlier when we were talking about our operators. This is the increment operator, plus. It's the update expression. So now I'm updating whatever is in that index now. Now, if it was 0 and everything was true, if 0 is less than 50, which is 51, which is true, here it's going to update that 0 into this inside this condition or this variable, and then the loop starts over. But this time, instead of it being 0, it's now 1. So it updates it to 1. Now it's checking. Remember when I said checking? When we're thinking about checking, we're thinking about conditionals. Okay, this expression is executed at the end of each loop iteration. The block of code surrounded with brackets, right here, the curly braces, is the loop body. The body is executed once for each iteration of the loop. And then we're going to talk more about that. In a flow of execution of the for loop, in just a few lines of code, a for loop contains a lot of detailed logic. So let's spend some time breaking down the flow of execution for the particular loop that we've been looking at. Here, we have this loop right here. This is the syntax of it. Here is the step-by-step description of how this loop executes. When the program reaches the for loop, the initial expression, let I, and we're assigning 0 to I, is executed, declaring the variable I and initializing it with the value of 0. This is what we taught you. Now we're hopping to the conditional part of the structure, the loop condition. Now whatever's in this I is now being checked against this particular value, which is 51, is evaluated, returning true because 0 is less than 51. Since the condition is true, the loop body executes, printing 0. After the execution of the loop body, the update expression I++ is executed, setting I to 1. This completes the first iteration of the loop. Pay attention, this completes the first iteration. We have many more because we haven't reached false. We have to reach false for the loop to be done, to be completed. So step 2 through 4 are repeated using the new value of I. The new value of I now is always going to get updated as long as the condition is true. This continues until the loop condition evaluates to false. In step 2, ending the loop in this example, this occurs when I is less than 51 is false. So the reason why we were talking about how come it didn't show 51, because once it got to 50 is less than 51, that updates to I to be 51. So when it gets to 51, is 51 less than 51? No, it's not. It's equal. And we're going to show you how that works in a moment. For the first time, since I update expression as 1 after each iteration, this occurs when I is 51. So 51 less than 51 is false. At that point, the loop body will have executed exactly 51 times. When I having the value of 0 through 50. In general, we can visualize the flow of execution of a for loop as a flow chart. Here's the flow chart of the execution. The initial expression declare and initialize the for loop. This is let I assign to 0 or let I point to 0 or 0 assigned to I. Then it goes to the condition. Then the condition, if it is true, it goes down to the loop body, executes the code within the loop, and then it goes to the next structure, which is to increment the index by 1. That's what plus does. It increments by 1, but we can change that to increment by whatever we want it to increment, but we'll explain later. And then it updates, and as long as it's still true, it'll keep going through the cycle over and over again until it reaches false. Okay, so we're at the end of this section, and what did we learn so far? We're learning about iterations. We understand the structure of a for loop. Now we're going to keep reinforcing it till you understand it. If this is one of those things you're going to have to practice. So we made it to the end of this section. Remember, the more you do, the more you improve. See you in the next section.